Hello, this is Foster Martinook, the creator of the Dementia, A Critical Perspective page. I'm here with my mother, Joanna Martinook, a caregiver for my grandmother with dementia, Lean Barrett. To get us started, could you tell us about your mother's condition generally and what you have had to do over the years to kind of care for her changing needs?
Sure. So my mother has hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain. So she had put a shunt in many years ago. But with the shunt, as well as, I'll say, aging, she's had mental decline. So it really declined after my dad passed, and also a stroke. So when she had her stroke several years back, we learned that she had several strokes. So I don't know if it's part of the hydrocephalus, but my mother has, I think, mini strokes that continue to this day. And so her mental state kind of comes and goes as, dementia patients have.
And so what do you feel that, you have had to do for, care-wise then for, kind of...
So care-wise is challenging. So we first have to put her in assisted living, which she did well on, but had to live through the pandemic years. So there was a lot of isolation, which I think further added to the dementia. I think that we killed some of our elderly with kindness. And from there, like I said, she had a stroke, and so ended up now in a long-term care facility. So with that, it is challenging in that you're now giving up kind of the care to others to kind of watch over her. And so I'm there every other day to kind of keep watch and to assist her. And each time you go is different. Sometimes she's very, alert and can have really good conversations. Other times she's in distress, right? Or she's having a hard time throughout the day. So it can be touch and go. And it's just really appreciating the time when she can have good conversation and really meeting her where she is, right? Kind of just being there and helping her kind of get to the next thing if you can.
And kind of going off of that, I guess part of the kind of care for you has been more so in kind of advocating for her and kind of being someone who's there to kind of just monitor how she's doing and seeing how what kind of care would be helpful for her. So could you just talk about kind of over the years what you've kind of had to maybe just different kind of instances where you've had to kind of work with kind of her condition in general, just kind of working with kind of the staff at the nursing home, and kind of I feel like that's kind of a lot of where your kind of caregiving has come into play, is kind of through that kind of just continue kind of advocating and things like that. So if you could just kind of...
I think it's advocating, but I guess it transitions over time, right? There's a part of when it's your parents, right? It's my mother. First there's a disbelief, right? You want to kind of look past it and you want to kind of make excuses for it or whatnot. And then you kind of watch and there's now a safety concern, right? You start to notice more things, and then there's a safety concern that she can't be alone. You need to do things for her. When she was in the assisted living, although they don't have full nursing, and so you have to provide that care. So you have to ensure the safety, you have to ensure, a lot of other things that of her care, right? So you become a caregiver, almost like a CNA, like you're now an assistant trying to help her with a lot of different daily activities. Making sure also that, she eats and does the things she needs to do. When it goes into a long-term care facility, there's a more of that, but then there's more advocating. Like you said, you have to, with our healthcare today, everybody's doing their best, but it's not their mother, it's mine. right? So I have to watch over and make sure that she's getting the care that she needs, and also that folks are listening, because with dementia, it's hard for them to articulate when they're hungry, when they're in pain, what their needs are. So it comes out in different ways. I think for my mom, she gets fearful and then she kind of lashes out, right? Because she is not understanding, or she gets a little bit confused, and then she doesn't know where she is, and then there's a lot of discomfort. And so luckily, I live very close to the long-term care facility, so I may get calls in the middle of the day or at night, and I go over to help settle her down. They can't, right? They just but when she sees me, she knows who I am. Like, I'm her person, right? I'm the one who can. I'll take some heat though. Like, it's not always just wicked easy to say, okay, yeah, you're gonna get better, but I can help her settle and get calm and kind of move on.
So this seems like it's kind of, I like how you kind of narrated like the transition from kind of doing more of kind of like the day-to-day, like once you're kind of realizing that there is that decline, kind of doing more of the day-to-day, and then kind of giving a lot of that day-to-day up, but still having to kind of be there because, like you said, it's not their mother, so you kind of you still have to be there to be the one that's kind of like, oh, well, I noticed that her, she hasn't had her hair done in a while, and like even just kind of simple things like that aren't necessarily even like medical. It's just kind of continuing to care for her and make sure that she's having a good quality of life where she's there.
And that's a good thing to say, because I say that to myself often. Like, the benefits is, or what you're trying to do is have quality of life. So it's the simple things of, my brothers and I send her flowers every month. She gets flowers on the 15th of every month. She gets her hair done. But at times she doesn't understand and thinks that she doesn't have money to go. And so there are times I'll show up and bring her down. But everybody needs those pick-me-ups, right? Like, it's quality of life, feeling good, getting outside, right? Now the nice weather's coming. I try my best to get her out there as much as I can. So yeah, you try and focus on quality of life. Yeah. And think of things to do, right? Because there's not a lot to do, right? And so, looking at old pictures, right? Because although with dementia, most of the time it's recent things they can't remember,
right.
But looking back, they can remember going to school, or remember these people, or who, what they were doing, or remember that dress, or so. You got to think of things that can kind of be calming to them and be a visit, like a nice visit.
Kind of talking, like, I've seen in some of kind of the research I've done that stuff like that people are trying to, because it's less of like a ability to have, say, a conversation with the person, because they're not really starting conversation or able to really carry a conversation very well. And so then it kind of is ways of kind of getting that conversation through looking at the photos and talking about them, or doing some kind of shared activity like playing a game or something like that. Like, it's kind of that has to
That's right.
take over your thing.
It's interesting you say that, because it's true. She will not spark conversation. It just doesn't come to her mind, as well as even if you mention, like her sister, or like she doesn't say, oh, well, how's her daughter? Or there's disconnects, right? Like, it's just there isn't that back and forth. And my mother was a big conversationalist, so it is, like you say, it's driving some conversations or memories thereof, and just trying your best to have it. Sometimes I'll just sit there quietly, because she just knows I'm there. So it's okay to be quiet too, right? But just be there.
So kind of transitioning from that, like, I feel like we got a really good kind of idea of kind of where you're at with all of that. And I'm interested to know, like, it seems like a lot of the care, for whatever reason, has kind of ended up something that you have done based on kind of being the only daughter and having two brothers. And so I'm just interested in knowing, like, do you feel that because you're the only daughter, like, do you feel that kind of that role was kind of expected more of you to kind of take over? Or is it not really necessarily being a daughter, it's just kind of happened to be you that was the one that kind of stepped up? Like, how do you feel that compared to your siblings, like, how do you feel that you've had to kind of deal with the care?
Yeah, I do think being the daughter and the only daughter, it does. A lot of people will say that, oh, thank God you have a daughter because, but it's interesting to me too. Well, I think also it would fall to me because it's my mother, right?
True.
But even when my father was struggling with dementia, it kind of fell to me. And I think it's partly too that, like I said before, it's hard to think that your parents aren't those as strong as they were or the caregivers that they used to be. And it's interesting to me that with both my brothers, it's been very difficult for them to face that this is happening. It makes them very uncomfortable. And yeah, I'm not sure if it's just, I don't know, being the daughter and a mother that you can kind of relate and kind of go past some of that, and really it doesn't all have to make sense. You can just kind of go from where they're at. You don't need to correct them. You don't need to make it so. But it's hard for my brothers to do that. And again, I don't know if it's just because it's the nature of what you've always done, getting, just supporting them and doing all that. But yeah, I do feel it does fall to me, but I think some of that too I take on, so I'm not really you know what I mean. Some
it's
of
kind
it is
of like
just the way you kind of feel you have to, not have to, but it's just, well, of course I will, right? It's my mother, so yeah,
definitely. I think it is kind of like there is a kind of gender component to it as well, and I think it's interesting that you bring up like the being a mother as well, like, because I do definitely think that that's part of it as well, as like being like kind of being able to kind of already kind of do a lot of that nurturing, because that's just kind of what's kind of expected of a mother, is to kind of have that nurturing role and kind of be problem solving with their kids and things like that, kind of being more hands-on. So I think that also applies to like caregiving in this way as well. And so just to kind of talk about, like, because I feel like you've gotten to a point now where you've been dealing with like Alzheimer's and dementia and this kind of thing for a number of years. And so I'm just interested in like how you feel like your perception has changed of like Alzheimer's, just kind of more in general, like when you, before kind of knowing that either of your parents had it, like what did you kind of understand Alzheimer's to be, and has it kind of been what you thought it was in having to deal with it, or like was there a lot of learning that was involved in kind of what it actually is like kind of what was that process like for you?
Okay. So when I was growing up, I worked in a nursing home. Like I went and did like volunteer work, and I didn't understand it. And actually, I was afraid of it at first. Like I didn't understand why folks were reacting like this. But what I find is that you're losing your parent, right? So there's somewhat of a grieving that is going on at the same time as you're trying to like care for them, and their behavior changes, and you're trying to kind of work through why that is, right? Like there's times where, and you're trying not to take it personal. So at the beginning, as much as you tell yourself, that it's the dementia and some of the behaviors or things that are happening, you can take it personal because they will lash out. And a lot of times, at least I believe, they lash out the one that's closest, right? The one that the caregiver for them, they're lashing out at, right? And so it's hard sometimes to not personalize that. And it's not the person that right? And you almost want to tell everybody, like, that's not how my mother behaves. Like, and that they know this, but you want to protect them, and you want everybody to know that, that's not who they are. But it's challenging, and it's challenging in the fact that it's touch and go. It's not at the same time, and it's not for certain things. And so I've grown to better understand it for sure, right? And to not take it personal. But you just wonder what is the quality of life when somebody has it, right? And you're just trying your best to brighten their day. Like as much as you can bring, treats and different things that they would like, and just hoping that you're making a difference, because sometimes it's unclear.
Yeah.
Because you'll leave and they won't even remember you were there. So some of that is difficult, but I guess for me, I've learned a lot, and I've learned to go with the mood, right? Go with what I can do, stay as long as I can, and check in when I can.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And kind of like keying into that, you mentioned like there's kind of a process of like grieving the person that they once were in a way. And so I'm interested if you could talk kind of more about that grieving process, and if you think it's something that is kind of if the process of kind of losing a parent, like you've kind of lost a parent already that had some dementia, but it wasn't quite to the level it is now. I'm wondering like if you feel that you've kind of already, obviously the loss is still going to be there when she actually passes away, but if you feel that it's prepared you at all, like kind of already having some of this mourning going on and kind of this grieving process, and having to kind of confront the fact that your mother, the way she was before, isn't quite there anymore. If that's kind of if you think that's going to be something that's going to be easier because you've already started to do the process, or if you think it's just kind of a different experience altogether, like how do you...
Yeah, it is. That's interesting. I do think I've been grieving, and I think I have been processing it throughout. And I know that I have felt it, but I know that when she passes, there's going to be another kind of grieving, right? Because I'm with her all the time. But it's also going to be a relief for her in my mind. Like, I really feel that as much as I will miss her, that sometimes it's better off, right? Like that being in a long-term care facility, being in a wheelchair where you can't walk anymore, she's having a hard time seeing, she can't hear that well. Like that part, I will be relieved for her.
Yeah, because there's a lot of like, yeah, it's like one of those difficult things that you're kind of watching someone deteriorate with old age in general, but then also just like kind of these other cognitive declines that it's kind of, there's that kind of process of seeing them go through that and then want to know, like, you want them to be there, like, as you kind of value that new relationship you've been able to build since having Alzheimer's, but it's also like, it's at the end of the day, it's kind of about them and what they're doing.
And it's hard with dementia, I think, in any kind of mental aspect. You want to fix it, right? And it's easier to manage when it's something outbound, right? You have a broken arm, you hurt your leg, there's things that you can just fix and you can move, and you can't, and you don't know what's happening. You don't know what's happening in there, and you don't know how to fix it. And that's difficult. And you don't know how they feel, because they can't communicate it to you, even if they could, because their brain is deteriorating, right? And so there's parts of it that are just, you wish you could know more, or they have that visible sign that you could just fix it.
Yeah. I think that's kind of like, because we're in a society that's so able to kind of handle so many health conditions, like it used to, there's so many things that used to just be kind of like, oh, they're gonna die from that. That's now we've have technology to fix it. So then it's kind of like with something like this, like we were able to deal with kind of other, I'll say, like kind of side things that occur maybe as a result of having dementia, like different falling and things like that might kind of be correlated in some way, but you're able to kind of medically fix those things. But then it's like you're dealing with kind of like the repercussions of that in a way. Like, it's great to have them here, but also it's at what cost at the same time, like, because you're kind of continuing life, but in a way that's kind of with a lot of kind of struggles and just declines and things like that. So you mentioned earlier that you kind of want it, sometimes it almost feels like you want to say, like, this isn't how my mother actually behaves, or kind of wanting to kind of just kind of make sure that people realize like that her behavior is a result of the condition. Do you feel that there's any kind of stigma around having Alzheimer's? Like, I mean, given she's in a care facility, so they kind of know of it, but like, does it feel like if you were to kind of have, if she were to have a conversation with someone, you know, kind of outside of the facility or something like that, like, do you feel like it would be something that you would want to like let them know in advance that she has Alzheimer's, or like how do you feel that you would kind of navigate that? Like, does there feel like there's kind of like a disclaimer in a way that you kind of want them to be prepared to know that like the state she's in, or do you feel, or that you would want to like kind of clarify stuff she's saying? Like, how do you feel that the people react to like having it? How do you manage that?
Well, in the long-term care facility, although they know, there's a concern of mine, whether it's real or not, that they'll dismiss her, right? That they won't listen to her when she needs something, or they'll take their time because they can say, oh, well, and they can kind of say whatever, right? Because she is struggling cognitively, and they can make excuses for it. So there's a concern of mine that she won't be heard. If I was to go out with her, I don't feel like I would have to do a disclaimer, but I couldn't let her be alone, right? Like it wouldn't be something where I would have her with anyone, just being and having a conversation. I would be there, right? So that I could somewhat course correct it, and maybe just say, yeah, we can go over that, or let's just continue. So yeah, I would feel that, I feel that she cannot be with others like without me, like, because I just feel that she wouldn't be able to fully communicate.
Definitely. Like, I think there's kind of a,
but I don't care what other people think about it, and I think people would know.
Yes, they
would just know. Oh, okay, you know what I mean. It just would, and again, it would be hit or miss. You could be having kind of a good conversation, and then could go sideways, and then it would be like, oh, okay.
So I feel like we've gotten like a lot of like a really good insight into kind of how you have handled it and that kind of thing. And I'm interested to know, like, for you personally, like, do you feel with kind of the things that are required of caregiving, even if it's not like it might have been at one point where you were helping with laundry and grocery shopping and things like that, like years ago, do you feel now that still that there's kind of a sense of having to remind yourself to, like, do you feel like you're reminded to care for yourself as well? And like, does it ever become like kind of like I'll say burden, that kind of has a negative connotation, but like, does it ever feel like it's kind of overwhelming at all, even given the fact that it's obviously you still care for your mother and you would still do all those things for her, but does it ever kind of feel overwhelming and if it does, like, you know, what's helpful to kind of combat that?
Yep. So, like you said, for years, before she, moved out, I was caring for two households, right? I was doing the food shopping, I was doing the laundry, I was making sure they were getting to their appointments, and also caring for my children and caring for my own home, and working full time, right? So, I believe, or when you can look back and say, wow, I was like on autopilot. It was just on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. So now being in this facility, there's relief to that, right? I don't have to do all the laundry. I don't have to do the meals. I don't have to. But I still have, I guess, the burden of, I can't leave her alone. Like, I don't want her to ever feel alone. So that's why I go almost every other day or 3 to 4 times a week, because I don't want her to feel alone. However, it's interesting because, like I said, she won't even remember that I was there. When I come the very next day, she could say, "Where have you been?" And so it's very interesting. It's a lot of it is my own, right? Like, it's this back and forth kind of a struggle to say, you want to care for your mother because she's here, and you know that she knows that you're there, but some of the pressure you're putting on yourself, right? It's this weird not wanting her to be alone and to be cared for. But there is, like I said, some relief because I'm not caring for all of the activities thereof. And I'm also working hard to be her daughter, right? For a long time, I was doing a lot of the caring, and some of that can get too personal, right? And I am her daughter. And so sometimes that's hard to make that separation, but you have to allow that to happen.
And kind of get allow for the staff there to kind of
Correct.
take over some of that stuff and try to, I mean, as much as you can to kind of get back into a sense of still providing more of an emotional kind of connection. So it's interesting that you bring up the idea that you are a lot of kind of the care and things like that where and going to see her is for her, but it's a lot of it's kind of not what they'll remember, what you'll remember kind of thing. And that's kind of a something that was mentioned in some of the research I've seen for just people's experiences kind of with caregiving for Alzheimer's patients. And I'm just interested to see would you, to what extent you kind of agree with that idea that a lot of kind of, I'm paraphrasing, but a lot of the ideas a lot of it is kind of managing what you'll remember and kind of the relationship that you're having versus maybe what they necessarily are going to remember.
Yeah. Like I said, I do feel that a lot of it is your own concern for their safety, but also I guess you don't want to let them go, right? And so you're going, even though you know that the time that you go, this time they might not be able to have that conversation or whatever, but you're always wanting to go because you may have that glimmer of a 10-minute conversation or a glimmer of they'll be there and you know that they're gonna the good thing for me is that my mother knows me. Yes. There's never been a time that my mother doesn't know who I am, right? That would be big for me. If I come and she's not going to know who I am, that is going to be another turning point, right? Another grieving, right? And that happens to people. I don't have that, which I'm thankful, because I am her person. And so, and maybe that's part of it. I want to just her to know that I'm here, and then she knows and she has her person. But yeah, it's difficult because it is. Even though it's going to sound weird, but even though I know my mother might not remember, I know she knows that I've been there. There's an underlining thing that I know my mother knows how much I care and how much I'm coming and how much I love her, right? I think that it's there, even though at times that we're not communicating it. It's really kind of weird. There's an underlining thing that even when my mother is not fully... say coherent, I don't know, but it's still known.
It's kind of like a
it's an odd thing to say.
No, it
but
makes
it's
sense though.
Underlining sense of each other, even without fully communicating in a way that you're used to communicating, right?
It's kind of makes sense that it's kind of like she knows, it's kind of like that she kind of has this feeling even if she can't quite put a thought to it or specific instances, just kind of feeling that she feels some sort of contentness or comfort in some way just by that kind of being there.
Right.
Even if she can't quite pinpoint it, it's probably somewhere in there that she's kind of been able to process that.
Yeah, she's somewhat in there. And she's in there.
And so just to kind of finish out the half hour here, I'm just interested with all we've talked about and kind of all the kind of unpacking. There's a lot that kind of goes on with this caregiving. What would you say, and this might be a difficult question, but what is kind of your biggest piece of advice or pieces of advice for if someone were to have a family member that they're kind of learning has Alzheimer's or some sort of dementia and that they might have to kind of take on that caregiving role to some extent? What would be kind of your biggest pieces of advice to them, or what have you kind of most benefited from?
I think, like you said, you have to remember to take care of yourself and be kind to yourself. You can't take it all on, and you can't take it all personally. Ask for help. It may not be help with caregiving for that person, but if you need somebody else to do your task, could you go food shopping? Could you do this for me? Could you ask for other things that would support you? Take time for yourself, even if it's, a walk. And know you're doing the very best that you can. And it's going to be challenging. There's going to be some days that you just want to sit and cry. And it's okay to do that too. And you're just doing your very best. And again, ask for help, take care of yourself, and know that I feel that even if they're not communicating with you, they know. They know how much you love them and are caring for them.
Well, I think that's a good place for us to kind of end this conversation. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about it, because I think it's something that is hard to fully grasp, like from any sort of like academic perspective, like whether you're coming at it more empirically and like more scientifically, clinically, or you're coming at it more from a sociological perspective. I think it's difficult to really talk about it without having these personal stories. So I think that having this conversation is really helpful, just to kind of get a picture of like what people are really experiencing on the ground, like what really kind of the process is. And obviously it's different for everyone, but there's a lot of kind of commonalities and different ways that it kind of impacts people.
A lot of people are living this. And it's good to talk about, because as we're living longer, more and more generations are going to see this, right? And we have to figure this out. And how do we be kind, and how do we fix our health? So yes, I'm happy to. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. All right.